This
close to.
conference will now be recorded.
We are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship. Our views are our own and do not reflect the position taken by any particular 12-step fellowship. This is not a substitute for membership of or attendance of a 12-step fellowship. We aim merely to share our experience. If that experience is beneficial, we are pleased. Each week, a number of presenters will present on the step in question. There will then be room for questions and answers plus discussion. The sessions will last an hour or so. During each session, send to the organisers any questions you have using the chat function. A recording of the workshop and written materials are made available online shortly after each session. The link is contained in the flyer for this workshop, a link to which will be reposted during the course of this workshop. Today, we're examining step 3, and in particular, we've divided step 3 into 3 elements. There's the material on pages 58 to 60, the material on 60 to 62 of the big book, and then we'll next week look at the solution, which is the step 3 idea. So we're on the middle bit now, pages 60 to 62, if you're looking at your big book or the laser display screen. I'll start off by giving a formal presentation of my understanding of the step. There will then be other speakers who will go into more detail about how their experience informs their understanding of the step. I'm now going to share my screen with you. There we go. So the bits in blue are from the big book. The bits in black in between are my notes. I'll be reading out some of the bits of the big book, and I'll be sharing very briefly on how I apply that. This full document is available on the blog. The blog will be linked to later on, so you're not going to miss anything. Right, so in case I didn't mention, my name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Now, the funny thing is here, by this point, we've already discovered that we're in an absolutely wretched state. We can't solve the wretched state that we're in. Our minds don't work properly. We're always right about everything and deeply unhappy, which is a terrible combination. And so we need to have God in charge. Fine. And you'd think by the time you've concluded all that, right, let's get on with it. Let's turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. Kushti, done. No, 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 no. 2 more pages to bash me over the head by saying, basically, this is the message of these 2 pages. Before we actually do this, let's make clear that this would be a really good idea, not just because you have an alcoholic or several hundred alcoholics in your life, or addict of some description, but let's look at the nifty job you've been doing of living in general, just totally setting aside the alcohol, drug addiction problem. And also, very interestingly, over the next 2 pages, it doesn't really mention alcoholics or addicts very much. There are a couple of passing references. What it's talking about here is how human beings operate in general. And how the way in which human beings operate in general does not work so well either. If you're not convinced, by the way, that the way human beings operate doesn't always work so well, try turning on the news once a week. Then you'll get some insight into the fact that, you know, why can't people just get along? Well, we don't know. But some of the data are in. There is evidence that they don't get on. Here might be some reasons why. So let's look at the next couple of pages. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. You see, we're such nice people. If only other people would behave, we'd be even nicer, wouldn't we? The only reason I'm mean is because you're dragging mud across the kitchen floor again, even though I've told you very clearly. Anyway, back to the text. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Basically, that's when I make a huge list of all of the things in the world which need to be okay for me to be okay. So, my work life needs to be sedate, highly productive, and highly lucrative. The flat needs to be, my flat I live in needs to be a show flat. Woe betide anyone undertake any activities that make it look lived in. That's not allowed. The world has to be neat and tidy. Everyone has to get on, go to work, do a good job, go home, mind their own business, and put ballet on the television. My little vision for the world. And that's what, when I'm run on self-will, propels me through life. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. Have any of you rearranged the fridge in the last week? I have. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, will be pleased. You see, this is the thing. When my other half was out yesterday, my other half is a hoarder. I don't know if any of you are married to hoarders. I know none of you are hoarders, but maybe you're married to hoarders. You wait till the hoarder is out, and then you see your opportunity. And yesterday, you see, left to my own devices, my bathroom would have one bottle of shampoo plus a spare, one bottle of conditioner plus a spare. We have like 17 shampoos, 17 conditioners, no one knows why. So yesterday I rearranged everything, put all the spares on really high shelves so that little fingers couldn't reach them. And when he came home, this is so embarrassing. I've been in recovery for 27 years. When he came home, I said, "I'm so excited. You have to see the bathroom." So I dragged him into the bathroom to show him how neat and tidy and logical everything now was. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. He did not look pleased. He didn't look upset either. So this is progress, but he wasn't nearly as excited about the newly ordered bathroom as I thought he should be. Life would be wonderful. And part of me genuinely believes if my house were perfectly clean and tidy the whole time, then I would be able to relax and read my book. And I've got a book I actually started to read yesterday, which has been on the shelf for literally 26, 27, 28 years. I finally decided I'm allowed to start reading it, even though there is paint peeling on the window. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. As with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. One of the things about working the program is that it gives you skills to get your own way by being nice. Like if you don't have the skill already, the program will because it will get rid of some of your character defects, but it won't necessarily get rid of the self-will problem. I thought for years that when I was being nice to get my own way, that other people weren't noticing that I was trying to get my own way. I used to belong to a gym where I chose a gym where the music was really loud. Like I could have chosen a dozen gyms, but no, I chose this gym where the music was really loud. There were some good things, but the music was really loud. And every day I'd go to the front desk and ask for the music to be turned down and explain carefully why this was reasonable. I mean, I can give you the explanation afterwards. It's fascinating. But anyway, eventually I actually, this is so embarrassing. I had to make amends to the chap behind the counter for just being like the worst person. And when I walked up to him to make amends, it was just a little apology. It wasn't a great big production number. As I walked up to the front desk, I saw his body tense up. Now, that was after me being nice me. So you can just imagine, the other varieties of me. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? And that's a very important line. Is he not a victim of the delusion, not an idea, a delusion, that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? My delusion has always been, if I get enough sex and money and power and prestige and comfort and thrills and appearance, there will be a little click and I'll be fine. And the basic result of living on that basis, you see, my plan for sex and money and power and prestige and comfort and thrills and appearance, unfortunately, doesn't quite match your plans. Again, if you turn on the television, watch some current affairs, you'll discover that different people have different plans. This would work only if everyone simultaneously had exactly the same plan, but they don't. And this is the problem. So it results in conflict with other people. I don't know if you've noticed this, but just because you want your own way doesn't mean you get your own way. So resentment. And if you have a couple of brain cells to rub together and you have the experience of not getting your own way and being upset, you'll cast your mind forward into the future and assume rightly that this pattern is going to repeat. I'm going to continue not getting my own way, which is what fear is. Fear is I'm not going to get my own way, and then I'm going to be unhappy. But the worst thing, this is why it's a delusion. The worst thing is you can get everything you wanted and you're still not okay. And I probably mentioned this before, the George Carlin line, trying to wrest happiness from the world is like trying to satisfy hunger by sellotaping, by scotch taping sandwiches to your legs. The things that I wanted to make me happy could not make me happy anyway. I mean, what will make me happy? That's going to come next week. So you'll have to hang on for then. We're looking at what doesn't work right now. So let's have a look. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. He's fine, but he's still unhappy. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, he's fine, but still unhappy. Politicians and reformers, blah, blah, blah. A list of people who are fine, but they're unhappy because someone else. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity. And self, what is self? There's obviously the self that, the soul breathed into us by the higher power. That's not the self that we're worried by. It's this false self of attachment to the world. And later on in the step 4, it's going to break this self down into 7 areas. Pride, the whole area of what do you think about me? If any of you are worried about what other people in this little workshop are thinking about you, that's pride. Self-esteem, what I think about me. If you've given yourself a thought over the last few minutes, well, self-esteem. Personal and sex relations, how are other people treating me? Pocketbooks, my finances, security, my needs and ambitions, my wants. If you want to find out if you're a self-centered person, ask yourself, spend a day, every half hour, write down the extent to which you've been thinking about one or more of these 7 areas of self. That'll pretty soon tell you the extent to which you're self-centered. I did this exercise when I was about 20 years sober. Horrifying. Now, a couple more points before I hand over to other speakers. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of my troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self which later placed us in a position to be hurt. I'll give you a couple of banal examples. Once I made the decision when I was doing the dishes that my other half didn't do the dishes nearly often enough for my liking, and I said to him, it wouldn't hurt for you to do the dishes occasionally. Now, this decision placed me in a position to be hurt, so I got attacked back in the most elegant imaginable way, but nonetheless, it produced a response that I did not like. But there's a deeper decision. The decision is that I can only be okay if my other half does the dishes 50% of the time and does them well. That's the decision. The reason I'm unhappy when I'm unhappy is not because of you. It's because I've strewn the world with landmines. Demands are landmines. When you don't meet the demand, that's you stepping on the landmine, but I blow up. And what the program is saying is, do you want to live differently? Do you want to not blow up every time someone doesn't meet a demand? But before we get to that, we've got to recognize that the problem is the demands. And I haven't got much more time. The whole document can be read later on. But basically, it's this. I can't get rid of this self-centeredness on my own. Because my solution is to sit thinking about myself in the hope that if I think the right thought about myself, I'll somehow be relieved of the pain, and it doesn't work. Sitting in a room on my own, on my chair, curtains drawn, light off, thinking it through one more time does not work. I needed to come out of my little cave and join a fellowship of people and laugh at myself. And there's some other stuff too. There's some steps, but laughing at myself. I think the steps are largely about laughing at ourselves. Anyway, so that's all I've got for now. So I'm going to, I'll be sharing all sorts of stuff throughout the course of the meeting. So keep an eye on the chat function and copy stuff from there into another document or a note on your computer so you have it for later. But right now,
Hi everyone, I'm Osher. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. So I'm just going to add a few points to what Tim already said. You know, for me, there's so much packed into these couple of pages. So if it dawns on me that other people here might be feeling inundated, and that's okay. I tend to read these pages several times a year, if not more, and still learning so much. You know, so for me, what is self-will? It's that kind of underlying feeling that I can have of I'm miserable. I can recognize that my life is beautiful and wonderful and how many gifts I have from my higher power, but still have this kind of voice in my head that's just gnawing away that I'm miserable. So that's my experience of self-will. And what is success? More and more for me, success is deepening and lengthening my closeness to my higher power. A few years ago, I had occasion to visit in a place I hadn't been for a long time and see a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while. And I really got sick and tired of sharing, my kids are good, my spouse at the time is good, I like where I live, you know, all the physical stuff, work is good, I enjoy my volunteering. And I really wanted to say things more along the lines of, I'm closer to my higher power than I ever have been. I really enjoy being able to help people that I sponsor. I like having a support system that I can engage. And so for me, that's this idea of success today. When I worked on this with Tim, actually, I'm going to quote Tim and sharpen something that he said. He explained to me that, if I understood correctly, Tim, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, that every person has their own script for how other people are supposed to act and be. And then because we all have our own scripts, they don't necessarily match. And that's what creates the resentments that we look at in step 4. And I have really, truly experienced that in my life repeatedly. The script that I write in my head, and I will say that I no longer consciously write a script in my head because when I can catch myself more often, but it's really just below the surface, and I really have to look out for it. Our troubles were of our own making. I had a lot of trouble with that one for a long time, internalizing it, because I had spent so many years in victim mode and in blaming. And it really took a long time for me to understand that they are not the problem, but my perception is my problem. And about self-centeredness, I find that to be very, very Anon. The idea that everything in the world and everyone in the world evolves around me. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and my non-alcoholic, untreated Al-Anon parents taught me that he could convince you that the war in Afghanistan is all about him. And if I call a certain company and I have a certain outcome, typically negative, then of course they knew you were calling. I mean, and so like I grew up with this understanding that everything is all about me, and expectations that I have from other people that if they make decisions in their life, they should run it by me because I have an opinion and I'm right and I can contribute. And so this self-centeredness for me was really something that I've had to come to terms with. And I'll close with just a point of I love the slogan that my best thinking got me here, or my best thinking earned me the seat. And I say that because I can easily beat myself up over really identifying with these couple of pages, right? But what we're learning in these couple of pages is that this is how the world goes round, and this is who we are, and it's why we come here, and it's why we need to take the next couple of pages that we'll learn about next week. And so that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me, right? It's not about judgment of I'm not okay, but rather, okay, this is the way it is. Factually, this is the way it is. And if this is the way it is, do I want to continue with this, or do I want to? Am I ready for a change? Having been convinced, am I convinced that this is the way it is? And if I am, then next week we're learning what we can do about it. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks. Evan, I think, has solved his audio problem. So do you want to come in?
Sure. Are you able to hear me, everybody? Okay. Hi, Evan, grateful member of Al-Anon. So yeah, I think one of the things that first of all jumped out is that I was very bad at laughing at myself for a long time. I don't take many things seriously. Some things I don't take seriously enough, but I took myself and my pride way too seriously, to the point where I would see slight in the smallest things, and I had to fake pretending that I wasn't insulted, but inside I would be burning up over whatever it was, not getting recognition for doing the dishes, and for rearranging the refrigerator, and which I actually did on Friday. So, but Yeah, learning that my problems are of my own making. That I know the Stoic Epictetus says it's not the things that happen, it's my judgment of the things that are going on that is my problem. That my ego is constantly getting in the way and saying, no, this is how my life should look. This is how people should treat me. This is how my kids should behave. This is how my relationship with my wife should look. And all of those things really aren't in my ego's control, so, or mine for that matter. And only my judgment of those things. I know in my faith tradition we say everything is in the hands of God except for the fear of God, and which I understand to mean that I can the only thing that I'm capable of affecting is my reaction to things. So yeah, I need to work hard to really get my my opinions, my judgments of what's going on in my life and those things going on around me in line with reality, and not with what my ego tells me it should be. And yeah, a lot of laughter helps, and finding the humor in those things that at one point would have really thrown me for a loop. Stopping just for a minute and thinking, seeing how utterly absurd my preconceived notion was, that that this person who, and the metaphor I like to use is expecting a very short person to be able to take a heavy book off of a very high shelf, and getting upset at them when they can't do that, is absurd on the face of it. So when I have these expectations of myself or others, I can now sit back and laugh and work on accepting God's world on His terms. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking as a very short person, I'm going to work hard not to take that personally. Michal, would you like to share?
Thank you. Hi, Michal. I'm a member of Al-Anon programs. I always get like a little bit of a faster heartbeat when I have to share in these meetings, when I get called on. Anyways, thank you for the opportunity. So I highly recommend reading these couple of pages a few times over, because it's so relevant. If my experience is relevant to everyone, just playing the actor and doing that Mr. or Mrs. Nice person, and then all of a sudden like Mrs. Mean, just whatever it is, just to get my own way, manipulation, or certain ways of getting things. I think this step is kind of like it's not, from my experience of sponsoring and doing this step, it's a developed step. It's not something like I mean, there's a slogan in program called progress, not perfection. So I feel like this step, even though there is like a practical aspect to it, it has that the spiritual element of just tapping into higher power. And it's not absolute. It's developed, and it's constantly developed. So it's just something that is just worth doing. And I wanted to speak about this, and Osher also spoke about it, because I think it's so important. People in program, Anons, I'm not an addict, but I also see in addicts just this need to be recognized, and this need to be other people to be proud of them, or whatever it is. And really it comes from the need for having a connection with a higher power. And whenever we do this step, the success of the step is reaching out to a higher power. That's all it is, and it should be like acknowledged within. That is, even if it's like a 2-minute experience, that is the success of this step. And that's all you need to do, because we're in this step, we're recognizing we're giving everything we want and everything we have over to God. And so when I'm acknowledging that God is running everything, and I'm accepting his will, and I'm asking him for help, then that is the success of this step. And I'm recognizing that he is going to do whatever it takes to help me, whether or not the outcome is not what I want. The problem that I see in step 2 is like, there's these quote unquote 2 forces in the world. There's like good and evil, right? So we think, but what happened? I'm on time, is that what that was? No, okay.
No, you're fine, it's just the system doing something.
Oh, okay. So basically, these 2 forces seem like 2 entities, but really it's one force. And it's a confusion. It's both the forces just focusing us back to the higher power. So we have to let go of our wills and our wants. I just heard this story. It's a quick story. I'll just close with it. That it was probably about a rabbi. I don't even know who it was, but I hear a lot of stories about rabbis. Anyways, this rabbi was walking through the Louvre. I think that's how you call it. It's like, if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's a famous art museum. And he was walking around and said, "Everything looks like yogurt." And he kept saying it over and over again. And so some guy went up to him and said, "Mister, go wash your glasses. They have yogurt all over them." And so basically the point of the story is, once we can wash our glasses of our yogurt, of our perceptions of all of our wants and all of our quote unquote don't wants or needs or whatever, and just focus on our higher power's will, then wash the yogurt off. The next steps will go into why we're afraid of that. But anyways, that was my deep philosophy of the day. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, that's wonderful. Emma, would you like to share?
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody. So for me, it starts at the beginning, being convinced we were at step 3, which is where we decide to turn our will and our life over to God. What does that mean? So I knew by this stage, when I got to this step with my sponsor this time, that's what I wanted. I needed that to be close to get rid of everything that had. And I was told that my cup was full of fear and delusion, and there was no space in it for anything else. So for me, I emptied the cup slightly with steps 1 and 2, and then there was space to bring that solution in. But it really was a matter of making sure I was solid with steps 1 and 2 so that I could actually get to step 3. It follows on in the next bit of the big book that life run on self-will cannot be a success. Self-will is acting on that next brilliant idea, and boy, do I have brilliant ideas sometimes. It's that thought in my head that I can fix this. I will fix this, and it doesn't matter whether anybody wants me to fix it or anything else. And I'll do this any way I can, by people pleasing, anger, manipulation, or really, quite frankly, anything that comes into my head in that moment. For me, it's almost always coming from my thinking. It's always coming from my thinking this is a brilliant, great idea, and I don't stop and ask myself anything. So it always ends up with that conflict, always. And when I went ahead with it, not surprisingly, it all ended up quite wrong. It was clear that I was trying to make others do what I wanted, and the show did not come off. I really thought that before program, it was completely normal to manage people, to do things for them that I could do that they could do for themselves. Complete martyrdom. Thought that was just the best idea ever, because then really I'm always the victim. Hearing it was a delusion, not true. That my thinking thinking that I was always doing the best for mankind, I was really lying to myself, and I needed to hear that. And I really, really needed to hear that. It was really hard to hear, but I needed to hear it over and over, that I was the producer of the confusion rather than the harmony, not anyone else. It was me. Honestly, it was so incredibly hard to hear. I wanted to shout, I'm not the addict. How can it be? I'm not the addict. I'm trying to make everything okay. Yet with that awareness and hearing the truth from my sponsor over and over, that I was in self-will and that it wasn't for the greater good. And even then, I was quite confused. And I remember her saying I was self-centered, and I did not like that at all. And really, it was all about my thinking. Really all going on what's in my head. And she said to me, who are you thinking about most of the time? And honestly, I said the addict. And then she showed me that that was completely not true. I needed him to be okay, so really I could feel okay. It was really all about me. And it was quite a shock, and it woke me up. I was wrestling satisfaction from life, and I was losing. The solution was God reliance. That was the key, knowing I had no power. Yet when I joined with God, then I had a power, but that took surrender and humility. I heard a talk recently, and it said that God is waiting there with the solution, and often the solution has been put in place before I even know that there's a problem. There's a quote in my tradition: God creates the remedy before the challenge. And it's really about calling out to him and knowing that for me, everything has been taken care of even before the situation, but I have to really believe that. He's saying exactly where I want, you are exactly where I want you to be. And the real problem is that I just don't know myself. I don't know where I am. And that's what helps with turning my will and my life over to God. I get to know myself. I did that through steps 4 to 9, cleverly. Problems aren't problems, they're just situations. It's a change in thinking. It's my reactions that's the issue. That I can do something about that. I can drop my demands. My troubles were of my own making, and in reality, I can't control it, I can't cure it, and I did not cause it. If I recognize that it's not the addict, it's actually me, and I can't control him or anyone else, the world is not on my shoulders. And this I learned from waking up, and waking up was a big thing in step 3. I needed God's help. I couldn't reduce self-centeredness on my own, not by wishing or trying by my own power. We had to have God's help. There's a very great rabbi called Rabbi Dessler, and he has this image that I'm going to finish with, but I'm going to paraphrase because it's a very long thing. But he says that perception is through a lens. We see the world through a lens, and that lens is either transparent or opaque in different degrees. The lens is just to see through. It depends on how clear the lens is, depends on how clearly I see life. With spiritual training, doing this program, awareness, listening to my sponsor, coming to talks, my lens becomes clearer and I can see life objectively. It's not all about me. With God, it's light and clear. When it's clear, I get rid of ego. And there's no longer this childish view of life. Life can be serene and peaceful. With a cloudy lens, there's 2 problems. 1, I obviously can't see. And 2, the cloudy lens reflects back at me. So I see myself. That cloud is my own false perception of life. More and more of the world looks like me because that's what it's all about, me. I think that's step 3 for me, that lens, seeing through it clearly by turning my will and my life over to the care of God so that I see the world as it really is. I do this with God's help. I can allow others their craziness and still be okay. That's the power of step 3. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Questions come in. Should I feel guilty if I don't want to live with an addict who is not working the program? What is the difference between a healthy self-care boundary and an unhealthy demand of the ego? Now, later on, when we're doing step 4, in the first 3 columns of the resentment inventory, we catalog what the demands are that are causing the emotional problem. And then the week after that, we're looking at part of that is saying, well, which of those demands are completely crazy and we just need to drop them because they're unrealistic, and which are actually fine, but they need to be downgraded to preferences and maybe we need to take action to put them in place. That's a whole topic for later on. But just the quick answer is that it's okay for me to have preferences and to work towards them. It's when they're upgraded to demands that I start to run into trouble. And it's okay, for me, it's okay to put in place a preference. If I don't want someone in my life, that's okay. Daniel, would you like to share next?
Thanks, Tim. And I also start to get heart palpitations when I start sharing in this meeting. I don't know why. Just wanted to go through a few of the notes that I wrote on this passage, because I think the core of the problem here is that up until this point, I basically have been playing God. This really talks to the Anon in me that is trying to control everything and everyone around me and fix everyone and everything around me. And I think that really that is the role of God. That's God's role in the world, is to fix and control everything. It's not my role, but I've been doing that. So I think the core of the problem is how exactly do we let God run the show, especially when for me, 40 years plus of very good practice in doing such a great job myself. Where's the room for God and all of that when I've been doing such a good job myself? So I think the issue is that my self-will has gotten in the way and has been very badly attempting to fit everyone around me into the role that I need them to play. And in the same way, I've been trying to take charge of everyone else's place in my life to serve my best interests, even though very often they are very pure and I only want the best from other people. That's my decision on what's best for everyone else. So regardless of what my motive is, whether it's a great motive or it's a self-seeking motive, it's still trying to manipulate everything around me to fit my worldview, and that's where the clash really happens. So reading through these passages and these pages, I'm learning that manipulation that I'm doing is basically self-seeking and self-serving, and that's the clash. I mean, these pages really talk to the Anon in me. The director, the actor, all the roles that I'm trying to play at the same time, and it's very transparent to everyone around me who sees that what I'm really trying to do is just manipulate the situation for my own will, and that clash always ends up in some kind of conflict, always ends up in either me being angry, indignant, self-piteous, and that's where my resentments come from, and I have to see that. And again, the question is, how am I going to turn this around and stop playing God? So I think that one of the core findings of this passage is that at the bottom line of it, most of us, especially coming into recovery, are mostly concerned with ourselves. I'm mostly concerned with what I can get. And that is where it says that I'm trying to wrest that happiness, and I can't get it. I'm never gonna truly get that happiness out of the world. So my self-will is the cause of all these troubles, and the only way to overcome that is to be completely rid of the selfishness, and that's where my recovery comes in, and that's where I start. And it's a tricky one, because learning to be selfless while getting a balance not to be the doormat is one of the biggest questions I think that comes up in my non-recovery anyways, and I hear it all the time. And that's really learning to align my motive with God's motive, because if my motive is pure and loving and selfless and honest, then that can't really go wrong, and that's through acting with love and through taking the actions of love. So I can't do that alone. I need God's help to help me to do that. And there's no way that I can get over it if I'm still playing God. So I need to learn how to just play whatever it is that God puts in front of me, the next right move. And that's really a big part of where my recovery takes me, is instead of trying to manipulate the entire show to fit my outcome, I need to just accept and see that, God put this whole thing in place. And what is my next right move? What does he want me to do next? And I can let him handle the rest. And that, for me, as an Anon, is incredibly difficult, because I know better than God most of the time. It's as crazy as that sounds, that's where my brain takes me. That's my insanity. So the core of it, the core of letting go and letting God, is to just turn it over and take the third step and then move. And for me, taking the third step is moving into 4 to 9. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Elisheva, would you like to share?
Hi, my name is Elisheva. I'm a member of Al-Anon and Al-Anon. Thank you. So when I got to step 3, I was convinced that my life was hardly a success, but I didn't see any self-will. I was sure that the lack of success was because of all the people around me and that they were in collision with me. I didn't see myself as being in collision with them. But as I read these pages, I was willing to take a new look at it and to see if I was actually in collision with them. And I decided to start with actually looking at relationship with one of my children who's not an addict. And it was the place at that time that I was most in collision. He was reading below grade level, and I wanted, as a good mother, and I wanted to help him, I wanted him to sit and practice reading for 10 minutes a day in order that his reading should improve so that his life would be better. And every day was a fight. Every day when it was time to sit down, all of a sudden he'd get hungry or thirsty or need to go to the bathroom or start fidgeting and making silly sounds. And he wasn't following my plan. And if he would only follow my plan and practice reading, his life would be better, my life would be better, the world, our lives would be wonderful. And what I was unaware of is that he had his own plan. His plan was, after coming home from sitting in school all day long, he's going to run around and play with his brothers. And he didn't want to sit and read. And I would get stricter and start threatening and punishing because he wasn't following my plan. And my plan was clearly for his benefit. If his reading improved, every class in school would be easier. So at step 3, I asked God to show me if there's any self-will, because on my own, I didn't see any self-will here. And I was really surprised that there was self-will, and I was very surprised at how much self-will was here. I realized that I wanted his reading to improve because my life would be easier, because then he wouldn't need my help with every single subject, with homework in every single subject. And the school was supposed to provide someone to take the test with him, someone who was going to read the test and then write down his answers. And they didn't always have that a person available, so he'd bring the test home. And in my eyes, this was coming on my time. I had to read the test for him, and then I had to write down his answers. And also, and I was really embarrassed by this, but the kids in his class would make fun of his reading, and he'd come home really hurt. And I didn't want to have to deal with his hurt feelings. And if his reading improved, the kids would stop making fun of him, and I wouldn't have to deal with his hurt feelings. And so what I saw was that it was really all about me and how if his reading improved, my life would be easier. And so I had to admit that I was trying to run the whole show, and that I believed if he did as I wished, his life would be better, my life would be better, everything would be perfect. And so I decided to take a break from reading with him, and I asked God to help me see who he would want me to be, who he wanted me to be in the situation, and how I could be different. And after a few weeks, we came back to practicing reading from a whole different place. I had asked God to take away my demand that he practice reading and the demand that his reading improve. And I made a deal with him that if he reads for 10 minutes a day, he gets a reward. And he could decide to read and get the reward, or he can decide not to read and not get the reward. And for the first few weeks, he decided not to read and not get the reward. And he saw that it was perfectly fine with me. And then he decided, well, let's see what happens if I get the reward. So he decided he wanted to read, and it took him an hour and a half to read. And every time he'd read, he'd get distracted and wanted to do something else. And what he saw was that every time he got distracted and went off to do something else, I just turned off the timer. And when he wanted to read, we sat down and he read. And after a few days of that, he decided it's not worth taking an hour and a half to read for 10 minutes. And he would sit down and read for 10 minutes straight and be finished in 10 minutes and get his reward. And what I saw for the first time was that it wasn't his resistance to reading that was the problem, was my reaction to his resistance that was the problem. And this is really good news, because I can change the narrative that I'm telling myself about his resistance, and I can change, and then my reactions will change. And then I started looking at my other relationships, and I saw the same thing. If I'm ever in collision with someone, it's not because they're in collision with me. If I'm in collision, it's because I have self-will. It's because I have a demand that the other person do something, and I have this old idea that I need them to do this in order for me to be okay. And what I've learned is that I can pray to God to take my old ideas and replace them with new ideas, and try my best to be who God wants me to be. And I'm finding as I do this, I'm less and less in collision with others. I'll end it there.
Thank you. Just to let you know, on the blog, a link to which is above, I'll repost the links in a moment in case anyone has joined us. I posted some articles on this question of you know, a demand's always unreasonable. So it's really a question of when is it okay to set boundaries, when is it okay to say no, when is it okay to ask someone to do something else. So I've posted some stuff which hopefully will be useful on that topic there. Sarah Rivka, would you like to share?
Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Rivka. I'm a grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon. I love this page. I love this concept. It was so helpful for me in to use this analogy of the actor, and I've taken it. Wow, I've taken it to two extremes. It's very helpful for me when I have a resentment or a situation that's difficult for me to write down my script and write down the other person's script. And of course, the other person rarely says what's in the script. I remember many years ago, my father was an active alcoholic, and my brother and sister and I were very concerned about him, and we decided to do an intervention. And we contacted a professional, and we met with him, and everything went according to my script until this man who was excellent said, you know, I hear that your father has a new girlfriend, and if the girlfriend isn't on board, this will definitely not work. It only takes one enabler in an alcoholic's life. And so, and he was very honest. He said interventions often don't work. I think 80% of the time they don't work. But if the girlfriend isn't on board, it's like, that's not even worth doing. So I wrote a script for my father's girlfriend, but I didn't give it to her because, you know, you can't do that. I just wrote it. And as the oldest in the family and the main rescuer and the heroine of this situation, I put on my superpower cape and I called the girlfriend and I said to her, you know, you may not have noticed that my father's an alcoholic, and we're planning to do an intervention with him next week, and we'd really like you to come to it. And now I start to give her hints about what's in the script, you know, and what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to support us in the effort to get him into a rehab, to get him into recovery. And she thanked me, and this was, I think it was on a Thursday or Friday, and on Monday morning she called me and she said, I went to the library, I took out 5 books on alcoholism, I read them all, I've memorized them, and I have come to the conclusion that your father is well, he is a heavy drinker, but he is not an alcoholic. And I had nothing to say because she had gone off script. You know, that wasn't what I had written for her. And in fact, the whole thing ended right there and was never brought up again. But you know, many times over the years, practically every day I turn to this and I ask myself, you know, what script am I writing for this other person? What script am I writing for myself? I believe today that God is writing a script for me, and that I am not the star of the show. I used to think I was definitely the star of this show, and why don't you people just recognize that I'm the star and bring me flowers and treat me, you know, red carpet, limousine. My name should be in lights. And the truth is, I've come to realize I have a small supporting role occasionally in some scenes. I'm a bit I'm an extra, and that most of the time I do not have a speaking part. And if I look down at the script, what it says is pauses, looks thoughtful. You know, and that's what I, you know, turns to God in her mind and thinks, and then says nothing. And when I recognize that, boy, things go much better. And yeah, every once in a while I just go rogue, you know, and I start doing improvisation, and that's just not good. So thank you very much for letting me share. Awesome meeting. It was great to hear everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more. Devori, are you with us today? If you're calling in, you'll have to press *6 to unmute.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Devori, a grateful member of Al-Anon. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for everyone who shared. It was a very wonderful experience. These pages speak to me a lot. I relate a lot to what is written on these 3 pages, and I read them often. I play God a lot, and the idea I lived by when I came to this place is that, yes, I can wrest satisfaction out of life if I manage well, and the keyword being manage. I felt it was very important to manage every single situation because, you know, I understand it best and I know exactly what has to be done for everything to be okay. And by reading this and working it through with my sponsor and seeing, you know, relating to what's written here, is like there was this very novel idea for me that I don't know everything, and I am trying to revolve the world around my understanding, which is making my life unmanageable. And it was quite a new way of thinking for me, that my troubles of making, I really thought my troubles were that other people weren't following my script, and maybe, you know, my part in it might have been that I wasn't explaining well enough to them what they needed to do in, you know, very tactful ways. And to see that actually my troubles were because of my worldview and not because of what other people were doing was a very big shift in perception for me. And the strongest part that brought me to this decision was step 1 and 2, was that I can see that it wasn't working. I couldn't play God, even though my ego was telling me I could just try harder, and that my life was unmanageable. And I could see that there is a new way that might work better, which was quite a scary idea for me to abandon my old way of thinking. But taking it further, seeing it through step 4 to 9, seeing where my demands were taking it and how they were actually just the demand, and it was very similar demands in most situations through my life, that actually brought me to see this way and to try and live this way, and to accept myself and to accept that I might have a demand, but I can let go of it. It's not anything else more than that. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Alternatively, Basha, would you like to come in?
Sure. Hi, I'm Basha, grateful member of Al-Anon. What do I have? So I wrote down, self-will sometimes works. I just heard this recently. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And that's the confusing thing for me. It's like sometimes when I manage, if things go well, things go my way and it works out, but most of the time it doesn't. So it's really just coming to the point of still giving it over to God, even if it's working. And a little bit about how I'm working this step right now. I hate the slogan, let go and let God. I use it less often than I use any other slogan because I don't like to get out of the way. Like, I don't like to let God run my life. I have to be really broken down to finally concede and say, you know what, God, fine. You take it, you do it, you run my life. And that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Lovely, thank you so much. So we've run out of time today. So someone's asked the question, are the previous 2 workshops available on audio? Yes, there's everything there. So all of the, it's more than 2, it's several. So there are several workshops available already. All of these are being recorded and posted. Later on today, this one will be up there. The commentaries on each step, the extracts from the big book, a whole load of quotations, other discussions prompted by what we talk about here are up there as well. So there's lots and lots of materials there. So come back next week for the solution if you can stand it until then. So would you please help me close using the Serenity Prayer? Feel free to unmute yourself and have your voice heard. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
things I can change, courage to change the things I cannot change, wisdom to know the difference. Wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.